The Voice 17104.com. This is Zanetta Wingfield, and you're listening to The Voice 17104.com. The Voice 17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Greetings, my friends, and salutations. Welcome again to the Richard James Show. Beautiful day, the sun is shining bright. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day because every day is wonderful. Today, we're going to have two basic, extremely different topics for the Richard James Show. And I want to examine a subject that I'm going to continue to take a look at and also do some journalistic investigation. And that is discrimination against the elderly. Also, elder abuse. That's discrimination against the elderly and elder abuse. Here in the second half of our journey, and will take up much of our program, is that we're going to talk about a Black or African Roman emperor. I didn't say Hannibal. Hannibal was a great leader from the country but from that same area, there was a African that became the emperor of Rome. And I found this video that I'm extremely impressed with. And I'm going to use it. I'm going to display it, and I hope you like it. But let me just talk about something and give you information about my situation. Well, first of all, I'm turning 82 years old, and when you're up there and you're that age, you may have a number of issues and problems. I got a problem with noise in the background, folks. Please just forgive me a second. I'm going to have to go close the door. I'll be right back. Sorry about this, but I have to do this. Forgive me, but sometimes when you're zooming from home, and that's what I'm doing, some other things may come into play. Well, let's get back to it. My next birthday, December, I'll be 82 years old. And I'm looking into insurance. I'm looking into different types of medical procedure. I just had a colonoscopy a couple of months ago, and it's a good thing to have periodically, particularly if there's a great need. And I was told I had some minor things that had to be removed, but nothing canceled or anything like that. But I was told, because of my age, that regardless to my state of my condition, that they would not recommend that I receive another colonoscopy. Simply not based on my health, not based on the need, but based on my age, they would not do it again. And I was stunned, but then I looked back on other issues. I can remember, and I'm giving you my medical history to a certain extent. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so my doctor was a Ramon, uh, who I think did an excellent diagnosis. But they said that because of my weight then, that they would not do surgery, but that they would do, uh, shall we say, radiology. Thank God the radiology seemed to have worked. That was like about 11 years ago. But there's certain things and procedures and approach uh, to medicine that places elderly people at a disadvantage. Another incident uh, that I've seen, and that's the way elderly people are treated in nursing homes. You know, during this uh, virus, major virus that was sweeping the country, the vast majority of individuals that were perishing were the elderly, and these people were under elder care in nursing homes, and nursing homes were plagued with this virus. Uh, had to be a situation some of the staff would catch that virus too. But elder people, they will say that if you get it, make sure that you get taken care of, and if you have any underlying condition, it will make that situation a whole lot worse than ordinary. In other words, and one of the underlying conditions is being old. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Also, if you look at the numbers of life expectancy, first of all, you look at America. According to what these politicians tell us, is that the United States of America is probably the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth. Whole lot of wealth. But yet our infrastructure is falling apart. But another thing is uh, many nations have greater or longer life expectancy than the United States of America. In other words, we don't live quite as long. Well, we weren't put here to stay. I mean, I'm not asking for a repeat. I'm not Lazarus. We weren't here to stay. We know uh, in the cycle of things that it's important that uh, that that death occur at some point we because we have bringing on new generations. That this country would be totally crowded if that was the case. But we want to get as much in on that journey as we possibly can. But in this country, the life expectancy is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And personally, I question the quality of healthcare that we're all getting. A lot of diseases, people, when they go to the hospital, that they didn't have before because of the hygiene. I think there's a number of issues and that we need to take a serious look at it. And we have not been doing it. We have not been doing it at all. I thank God for longevity and being functional at this age, being able to do this broadcast, for example, at the age of 81, and to be able to do it and to be able to share with you some very important information about life to help your journey be a more satisfying journey and more effective. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the fact that my business, that I have my business uh, in Lebanon, downtown Lebanon, 35 South 8th Street, Lebanon Valley Farmers Market. We have a business there. It's all a good thing. and to be functional. I saw a friend of mine the other day that stopped by my vendor's table, at the Gaskins Black History Program. My friend Caleb Jackson, who was 90 years old, looking great, standing tall, just as brilliant as he can be. I said, Lord, if I could live to be 90 and follow Caleb Jackson's example, I would be truly a blessed individual. But I think that maybe people who are at my age need to start talking to each other and need to start taking a whole look at the whole system. I think we need to really, really take a look at the system to see if there's some things that we can do. Take a look. How are people being trained? How are doctors being trained? And it seems to me that once you get a certain age, they put you in a trash can. They throw you away. You're too old. You're gonna die anyway. So leave, go. That's terrible. Took a look at some insurance policy. We live in a capitalistic society, which is based on profit. Simple as that. And after you reach a certain, I was told, for example, that particularly with different types of insurance, like long-term life insurance, things that are any type of insurance, that it becomes more difficult to get. In fact, after a certain age, you can't get it, period. But the older you get, the more expensive the insurance is. Age is a determining factor on the quality of what you get, the content of what you get, and whether or not you get it, period. And I think some of our politicians who are not owned by these companies should start doing some investigation. Take a look at what's happening, because we're all subject to some of these same rules, except for the more money you have, the better off you are. But the older you get, the more you have a problem in trying to get adequate health care, adequate insurance. It's just a very, very difficult thing. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that. And you're going to hear from me again, because I'm going to start pulling in any medical providers who have the guts, the nerve, the interest to come on this show and talk to us about healthcare. I'm also going to talk to people and interview people who, for example, are in the delivery of elder care to come in and talk about programs they have and that exist, because I think it's important for you to know exactly what's going on. And we need to, and the only way sometimes you can deal with some things is to expose those things for what they are. Okay, that's my sermon for the day. Now let's go to history. I have always loved Black history, and studying the history of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, it started in Rome. Rome is in Italy. So the basis for the Roman Empire was Italian. But you have to know something about Italy itself. Italy is where Black Europeans existed, the Grimaldi people. Thousands of years ago, they existed. And I say the Italians have Black blood in them. It's a fact. They may not like me to say that. They may want to shoot me for saying that, but it's the absolute truth. But anyway, as that empire spread, it also spread to North Africa. And we have a gentleman, and I'm going to play the video that's going to share. We're going to share with you information on the African was the first African emperor of Rome, the Roman Empire. Let's go. Say it.
After emerging victorious from a period of civil war, Severus expanded the borders of the empire to new heights, ushered in a period of imperial transformation, and founded a new dynasty. He was the first African-born Roman emperor. Early life. Septimius Severus was born on the 11th of April 145 at Leptis Magna in Tripolitania, a city founded by Phoenician traders. Its natural harbour made for a perfect staging post for traders on the route to southern Spain. Septimius was of Punic and Italian ancestry. His mother was Italian, and his father was Punic. His family was one of the two prominent families in Leptis. Septimius had two uncles of consular rank, and some of his ancestors had held high public office in Rome. It is said that young Septimius's favourite game was judges. He and his playmates acted the part of lictors, carrying the bundles of rods and axes in front of him, while he took the role as Roman magistrate. He spent the first 17 years of his life in Leptis Magna, where he was educated in Greek and Latin. Cassius Dio recalled that Septimius had been eager for more education than he actually received. In 162, when Septimius was 17, he gave a public speech in his hometown, a declamation. This marked the end of his formal schooling. Soon thereafter, he set out for Rome to continue his studies. In Rome, Septimius was granted senatorial rank by Marcus Aurelius at the request of his uncle, who had been consul not long before. But he could not enter the Senate until he was co-opted for one of the quaestorships, which he was still too young to attain. Septimius was a superstitious man and fond of astrology. A number of omens are reported from his earliest time in Rome that alludes to his eventual elevation to the purple. One such omen records how he was invited to dine at the imperial palace, but he came incorrectly dressed, wearing the pallium or Greek cloak instead of the formal toga. To remedy his mistake, one of the emperor's togas was given to him, and perhaps at this same banquet, one of the emperor's servants inadvertently offered the imperial chair to Septimius, who promptly sat down on it, not knowing that this was not permitted. Quaestor. He was selected for one of the 20 quaestorships in 169 and took office on the 5th of December that year, and served for 12 months. Thus, Septimius officially entered the Senate. Interestingly, he served a second term as quaestor in the following year. This time he was to accompany one of the proconsuls to one of the 10 senatorial provinces. He was to serve in the province of Baetica in southern Spain. But before he could set off from Rome to his new province, he received news of his father's passing. So he went back to Leptis Magna to settle the affairs of the family. While he was in Africa, events prevented him from taking up his appointment. Moorish tribesmen took ship and invaded southern Spain. As he was unable to take up his post in Baetica due to this raid, it was decided that the imperial province of Sardinia would fall under the control of the Senate for the following year, while the problem in Spain was dealt with by Marcus Aurelius's old friend, Aufidius Victorinus. Septimius set off for his new commission in Sardinia. In 173, one of his relatives had been selected, by lot, to be the proconsul of Africa, and Septimius was selected to be one of his legati pro praetore. And when he was legate in Africa, he returned to his hometown preceded by his lictors, when an old acquaintance came up to him and embraced him. He had the man flogged. No plebeian was to embrace a legate of the Roman people in this undignified way. In the following year, 174, he was selected to become one of the tribunes of the people, a once powerful position in the Republic, which was by now more or less obsolete as the emperor possessed the tribunician powers. When Avidius Cassius revolted in 175, upon receiving false news of Marcus Aurelius's death, there was widespread panic in Rome. Most of the Praetorian Guard and armies was at the front fighting with the emperor in the Marcomannic Wars, so Rome was vulnerable. Cassius's revolt highlighted one fact: the succession was still unclear. Marcus Aurelius's son, Commodus, was still too young to rule, and had none of the powers of an emperor. This seems to have made a deep impression on Septimius, who would, in the future, secure his own son's succession by sharing imperial power at a very young age. In that same year, Pertinax was made consul with Didius Julianus as his colleague. No one objected to the appointment of Julianus, as he was a high-ranking public official. Pertinax, however, had risen from a junior officer in the armies in just a matter of years to now the highest rank a senator could hope to attain. Legio IV Scythica. Then in 176, Septimius was praetor. As a praetor, he presided over the law courts, and perhaps because he fulfilled his duty in an exemplary way, he was sent off to his next post, his first in the emperor's service. He was to serve as legatus aeridicus in Hispania Tarraconensis, responsible for legal matters across the province. By the year 180, his term was up, and he was appointed to a legionary command in Syria over Legio IV Scythica. He was to serve under the governorship of Pertinax as one of the 3 legionary legates in Syria. This contact was to prove fateful for Septimius's entire future. It is attractive to imagine Septimius visiting Tyre and Sidon, the old Phoenician cities from where his ancestor came, during his stay in Syria. Perhaps he met his future wife, Julia Domna, at this time as well, who was a native Syrian of regal stock. Her father was a priest of Elagabal at Emesa. Her horoscope predicted that she would marry a king. We know that Septimius had the occasion to visit Emesa and met the priest during his commission. Following his departure from Syria, he went to Athens to study and for religious purposes, and to see the monuments and antiquities. It's been theorized that he was dismissed from his post in Syria following the Lucilla conspiracy, but he was denied further advancement for several years. But following the removal of Commodus's strongman and prefect of the Praetorian Guard, Perennis, Septimius was promoted to the governorship of Gallia Lugdunensis. Upon the closing of the Marcomannic Wars, bands of runaway slaves and deserters were roaming through Gaul, Spain, and Italy. So Septimius would have had his hands full, even though he had no military under his command except the urban cohort in Lugdunum, 500 men. During his governorship, his wife Pacia Marciana died. Virtually nothing is known of her, and they had no children together. Septimius was in his 40s by now, and anxious to remarry. According to the Historia Augusta, as a very skilled astrologer, he inquired into the horoscope of potential brides. Since he had learned there was a woman in Syria whose horoscope predicted that she would be married to a king, he sought her as his wife. It was, of course, Julia Domna. She possessed the attractions of beauty, united with a lively imagination and a firmness of mind and strength of judgment. After the proposal was accepted, Septimius had a dream. The Empress, Faustina, Marcus Aurelius's wife, dead for more than 10 years, was preparing the bridal chamber for himself and Julia in the great temple of Rome and Venus near the imperial palace. In another dream, the Roman Empire itself, personified, approached him and saluted. Most impressive of all, someone took him up to a high mountain from where he could see Rome and all the world. As he gazed down on all the land and sea, he laid his hands on them as one might an instrument capable of playing all modes, and they all sang together. They married in 187. During this governorship, Septimius and Julia had their first son, Bassianus, on the 4th of April 188. This is the future Emperor Caracalla. Septimius's governorship in Gaul ended in 188, and he returned to Rome, where he entered his name into the ballots for a proconsulship, and he was granted the province of Sicily. In 190, Septimius was elevated to the consulship, appointed by Cleander, Commodus's right-hand man. That year had the record number of 25 consuls. Septimius returned from Sicily in April of that year, and at once faced trial. According to the Historia Augusta, he was accused of consulting seers or astrologers about the imperial position. The charge could be constructed as treason, but the case, which was heard by the guard prefects, was dismissed, and his accuser crucified. Septimius was without employment for about a year after his consulship. In the summer of 191, Laetus put through a surprising appointment. Septimius was made governor of Upper Pannonia, on Laetus's recommendation. Laetus was the praetorian prefect, and he would come to play a key role in the future of the imperial throne. Upper Pannonia was one of the key provinces of the empire. It was the closest province to Rome, with 3 legions stationed in it. With Septimius's limited military experience, this appointment is surprising. Perhaps Laetus was planning the removal of Commodus and the installation of Pertinax, who was friendly with Septimius, that it would make sense to install the rather inexperienced Septimius in such a vital governorship. At the same time, Septimius's brother, Geta, was also appointed governor of Lower Moesia, with 2 legions. The year 193. On New Year's Eve of 192, Commodus was strangled to death by a wrestler at the instigation of Laetus and his fellow conspirators. The elderly Pertinax was selected to become the new emperor of Rome, and the following day, the 1st of January 193, he received all the imperial powers from the Senate. However, he would only rule for 87 days before being cut down by the Praetorian Guards, who found his rule intolerable. They wanted to go back to the days of Commodus, when the Guard had more autonomy. Didius Julianus was able to secure the throne by, essentially, bribing the Praetorians to proclaim him emperor, and his position was secured by the Senate shortly after. However, the key provincial governors, such as Septimius and his brother Geta, were loyal to Pertinax. So too was Claudius Albinus, who was the governor of Britain at the time. 12 days after Pertinax's death, Septimius Severus made his own bid for the throne, with the support of the 3 legions in his own province, and with the backing of the governor of the neighbouring province of Lower Pannonia, and of course, his own brother in Lower Moesia secured him a strong power base close to Italy. Septimius depicted himself to the troops as the avenger of Pertinax. One of his 3 Upper Pannonian legions was Legio I Adiutrix, which had been commanded by Pertinax 20 years before. Some of the men in the legion would have served under Pertinax. He changed his name, adopting Pertinax's name, styling himself Imperator Caesar Lucius Septimius Severus Pertinax Augustus. To secure his western flank, before moving on Rome, Septimius sent emissaries to Claudius Albinus, offering him the title of Caesar, which carried the prospect of succession if anything were to happen to himself. Septimius's son was only 5 years old at this point, so the offer was perhaps genuine. Albinus would remain in Britain. Soon, news arrived that Pescennius Niger proclaimed himself emperor in Antioch. He was the governor of Syria. Egypt soon swore allegiance to Niger as well. Ironically, while Septimius and Niger secured the loyalty of the armies of the empire, Didius Julianus struck coins in Rome asserting the unity of the armies. The secret police, the Frumentari, were tasked with the assassinating of Septimius as he started his march on Rome. Septimius and his army appeared on the borders of Italy before it was known that he had been proclaimed. At all events, Julianus failed to block the passes. The best he could manage was to send one of the prefects of the guard to take command of the Ravenna fleet and lead some resistance with it. But Septimius, proceeding via Aemona and Aquileia, met no resistance in taking Ravenna. Didius Julianus's preparations in Rome grew increasingly desperate as Septimius came closer to the capital. His attempts were futile and ineffective. The Praetorians loathed to undertake the kind of military engineering at which the legions were so skilled, and some of them hired substitutes to do the work for them. Senatorial envoys who went to plead with Septimius went over to his side. When he drew closer to the city, Septimius sent a letter to the Praetorians to keep the murderers of Pertinax under arrest. He summoned the Senate, and Julianus was condemned to death. Septimius proclaimed emperor, and Pertinax deified. Julianus was killed by a common soldier in the palace, having been emperor for only 66 days. Emperor. His first act as emperor was to deal with the Praetorian Guard. He summoned them outside the city and told them to leave their weapons in the camp. While the camp was empty, Septimius's own soldiers seized the camp. He addressed the Praetorians, attacking them bitterly for their betrayal of Pertinax. They were all discharged and ordered to leave Rome on pain of death. Their uniforms and ceremonial daggers were taken. Such was the end of the Praetorian Guard. But the Guard itself was replaced with his own soldiers from the Danube. Prior to this, the Guard consisted of Italian-born members. The urban cohorts, the Vigiles, and the Guard were all considerably increased in size, and a legion was stationed at Alba, just outside Rome. He finally entered Rome dressed in the formal toga, but escorted with his troops in full battle gear. His second act was to oversee a proper imperial funeral for Pertinax in the Forum, where he held a eulogy to the dead emperor. The ceremony was an important gesture. Septimius was to model his own reign on that of Pertinax, whose own exemplar was Marcus Aurelius. Less than 30 days elapsed since his entrance into Rome, before he set out to deal with the usurper Pescennius Niger, who was advancing from the east. Niger was at this point so puffed up that, when men called him a new Alexander, he showed his pleasure, and when a man asked, "Who gave you permission to do this?" he pointed to his sword and answered, "This." Niger had advanced to Byzantium, and from there advanced against Perinthus, but he was disturbed by unfavourable omens that came to his notice. For an eagle perched upon a military standard and remained there until captured, in spite of attempts to drive it away, and bees made honeycomb around the military standards, and especially around his images. For these reasons, he returned to Byzantium. Septimius left for the east along the Via Flaminia, the same route he had taken just a month before, opting for the land route rather than going by boat from Brundisium. Septimius made for Perinthus, his headquarters, while Niger was still in Byzantium. It seems like Niger grew desperate, and he sent envoys to Septimius, offering to share the empire. This was rejected out of hand, while Septimius offered to spare Niger's life if he submitted and went into exile. In the autumn, Claudius Candidus, one of Septimius's generals, took the Pannonian army across the Sea of Marmara, where he defeated Aemilianus, Niger's most prominent supporter, who fled to Cyzicus. But he was captured and executed by Candidus. His army fled eastwards, out of the province of Asia, into Bithynia. Candidus pursued on both land and sea. The two great Bithynian cities reacted predictably. Nicomedia responded to the Septimian victory by an immediate change of side, sending offers of support. Candidus sent his troops ahead there, outflanking the enemy. Nicomedia's rival, Nicaea, gave a welcome to Niger's army. Niger himself managed to make his way there from Byzantium to take personal command. Candidus led his troops against Nicaea from the north. The battle took place in the narrow passes west of the city, probably in December or early January of 193. Candidus had stationed his troops on the high ground, and at first they had the advantage, although the fighting was confused. Some of the enemies were shooting arrows from boats on the lake. When Niger himself appeared, the Septimians began to retreat. At this point, Candidus displayed extraordinary qualities of leadership. He seized hold of the standard-bearers and forced them to turn round to face the enemy, rebuking his men for taking flight. This saved the day, and Niger's forces only escaped complete destruction through the onset of darkness. Niger retreated back towards Antioch, while most of Anatolia now swore allegiance to Septimius, and a few weeks later, Egypt defected to Septimius. He had summoned his trusted friend, the proconsul Cornelius Anulinus, who had by now arrived and taken control of the Septimian army and its pursuit of Niger. Septimius may have remained at Perinthus, but would have followed before long. A battle took place at one of the passes Niger had fortified. The decisive battle took place close to Issus, where Alexander the Great had defeated the Persian king Darius more than 500 years before. Anulinus's men were helped by a heavy thunderstorm and rain from behind them driving at the faces of the enemy. But the decisive factor was Anulinus's move in sending Valerius Valerianus around with the cavalry to take Niger's army in the rear. They were already retreating, their morale lowered by the thunderstorm, when Valerianus appeared, and they were trapped. According to Cassius Dio, they lost 20,000 men. Niger fled to Antioch. The city was captured, and so too was Niger, who was caught on the outskirts of the city, apparently fleeing to the Parthians. Antioch was severely punished. It was deprived of its civic status, and was relegated to being a parish of the new provincial capital, Laodicea. Funds were raised on a massive scale from Syria, and most of the eastern governors and legionary legates lost everything following the fall of Niger, with their property seized. Byzantium was still under siege, and even when Niger's head was presented to the city, they refused to give up. The siege would last for more than 2 years. Cassius Dio records, "The Byzantines performed many remarkable deeds, both while Niger was still living and after his death. Their city is most favourably situated in relation to the 2 continents and to the sea that lies between them, and possesses strong defences both in the lie of the land and in the nature of the Bosphorus." Septimius and Julia would have toured the whole province, visiting her hometown of Emesa. She had left the city 7 years ago for Lugdunum to marry Septimius. Now she returned as Augusta. The First Eastern Expedition. Various rulers in the east had shown active support to Niger, and some of the troops loyal to him had fled across the Euphrates. Nisibis, a city dependent on Rome, had been attacked by the kingdoms of Osrhoene and Adiabedi. Both of them had given aid to Niger. Much of 194 was spent planning and making preparations for an expedition into Mesopotamia. This would accomplish a few things. Legions who had fought against each other would fight side by side against a common foe, which would strengthen army unity. The kingdoms who had supported Niger would be punished, and it would solidify Septimian rule by winning a war against an ancient enemy. The Parthian Empire was now weak and tied up by internal strife. In the spring of 195, Septimius crossed the frontier at Zeugma into Osro. The kingdom could put up little resistance and was subsequently annexed. Its king, Abgar, was allowed to retain his capital, Edessa, and a small territory surrounding it. Julia Domna was at her husband's side during the campaign, and on the 14th of April 195 was honoured with the title Mater Castrorum, Mother of the Camp. Soon after his victory in Osron, Septimius took a remarkable step. He proclaimed himself to be the son of Marcus Aurelius, and his son Bassianus, who was only 7 at the time, was renamed Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, and was granted the title of Caesar, appointing him as his successor. I will refer to him as Antoninus from now on. However, history knows him as Caracalla, from the nickname the plebs gave him, a Celtic word for the hooded cloak he wore. His victory beyond the Euphrates, for the time being, led only to the annexation of Osron, but some fighting took place against the Adiabeni as well. A triumphal arch was constructed in Rome following his campaign. Albinus. When Septimius was campaigning across the frontier, some senators were trying to persuade Claudius Albinus to come to Rome while Septimius was absent, engaged on other matters. Albinus was preferred in some aristocratic circles in Rome. When Septimius found this out, he sent his most trusted couriers to Britain with instructions to kill Albinus. Albinus's advisors were suspicious and cautioned him to be on his guard. The couriers were seized and divulged their instructions under torture. The fact that Septimius had granted the title of Caesar to his own son and his own assumption of the Antonine ancestry can only be read as open challenges to Albinus. In 195, Albinus sent armies into Gaul and proclaimed himself emperor. Septimius had prepared for this invasion of Albinus and installed his supporters in the key provinces of the empire. Rome itself was controlled by his own kinsman, the ruthless Fulvius Plautianus. And the successful general Candidus had begun moving his Pannonian army westward. Septimius himself stayed in the east a little longer, but was soon himself marching towards the west. During the journey westwards, Polonius Auspex, governor of Lower Moesia, greeted Septimius with a sarcastic comment on his self-adoption into the Antonine dynasty. "I congratulate you, Caesar," he said, "on finding a father." Cassius Dio records an interesting event from the war. Numerianus, a schoolmaster who taught children their letters, set out from Rome to Gaul for some reason or other, and by pretending to be a Roman senator sent by Severus to raise an army, he collected a small force at first and killed a few of Albinus's cavalry, and also performed some other daring exploits in Severus's interest. Severus heard of it, and believing that he was really one of the senators, sent him a message commending him and bidding him increase his force. The man did so, and among other remarkable exhibitions of his prowess, he captured and sent to Severus 70 million sesterces. After the latter's victory, Numerianus came to him, concealing naught, nor yet asking to be made a senator in very truth. On the contrary, though he might have been exalted to great honours and wealth, he did not choose to accept them, but spent the remainder of his life in some country place, receiving a small allowance from the emperor for his daily needs. Novius Rufus, governor of Tarraconensis, had declared allegiance to Albinus and moved into Gaul and secured Lugdunum, which he made his headquarters. He defeated the governor of Lower Germany, Virius Lupus, who was a Septimian supporter. However, Novius Rufus failed to occupy the Rhineland, and after a failed siege of Augusta Treverorum, he moved back to Lugdunum to prepare for the impending battle. Before setting off for the campaign against Albinus, Septimius stopped in Rome for a short time before moving towards Gaul, but he went through Pannonia. This passage through Pannonia was the occasion for Septimius to be assured of success by a prophecy. He learned from the Pannonian augurs that he would be the victor. From there he went into Noricum and Raetia, and then into Upper Germany. From here he moved south towards Lugdunum with his army, in the winter of early 197. Albinus marched out of Lugdunum, and 60 miles north of the city, the first clash took place. But Albinus's forces were pushed back south to the outskirts of Lugdunum itself, where the final battle took place on the 19th of February. At first, Albinus's left wing was defeated, and they were pursued back to the camp. Septimius's men pursuing them burst into the camp and proceeded to slay them and plunder their tents. On the right wing, however, Albinus's forces had dug a series of concealed pits, and the Septimians were lured into them by a feigned retreat. Septimius himself came up on horseback with the Praetorians, but instead of saving the situation, got himself into extreme difficulties and was thrown from his horse. Then, tearing off his riding cloak and drawing his sword, he rushed after his retreating troops and shamed them into making a stand. That was the official version. According to Herodian, he simply fled with the rest and flung off the purple cloak to conceal his identity. But the day was won when the Septimian cavalry, led by Julius Laetus, appeared and routed Albinus's troops. Albinus's forces were pursued into Lugdunum, which was sacked and burned by the victorious army. Albinus himself committed suicide, and his body was brought to Septimius, who feasted his eyes on it. The Historia Augusta adds, the corpse was, by Severus's order, laid out in front of his own home, to be exposed to view for a long time, besides which he himself rode over the body, and when the horse shied, he spoke to it and loosened the reins to make it trample boldly. Septimius's trusted general, Claudius Candidus, was sent to govern Tarraconensis following the execution of Novius Rufus, and with most of the legions stationed in Britain fighting on the mainland, the island was left with a bare-bones garrison, which resulted in most of the northern parts of the province being plundered by the opportunistic tribes across the frontier. Virius Lupus was made governor of that province and was sent back with the defeated British legions. Julius Laetus was sent to the new province of Mesopotamia, perhaps due to renewed aggression in the region. The Senate in Rome awaited Septimius's return to the imperial capital with justifiable apprehension, for he had taken possession of Albinus's correspondence. He came to Rome filled with wrath at the people and Senate. His speech in the Senate caused dismay, as he praised the severity and cruelty of Sulla, who had drafted lists of people who he had wanted to be killed, when he had been proclaimed dictator during the late Republic. Furthermore, as he now styled himself the son of Marcus Aurelius, Commodus was his brother, and therefore demanded his deification. The wrestler who had strangled Commodus, Narcissus, was thrown to the lions. A ruthless purge of the Senate was ordered, on the same line Sulla had done centuries earlier. 29 senators were put to death and their property seized, which would lead to a substantial influx of cash to the treasury. Many were killed a year or so later for consulting astrologers about the emperor's life expectancy. The Historia Augusta reports. That, coupled with the debasement of the currency, made it possible for Septimius to grant a major pay increase to the army, the first of its kind in over a century. And the soldiers were now allowed to marry, something that had been forbidden since the very beginning of the empire. This, of course, solidified the loyalty of the whole imperial army to the Severan dynasty. The Second Eastern Expansion. While Septimius had been preoccupied with the civil war, the Parthians had attacked the new province of Mesopotamia, laying siege to Nisibis. Cassius Dio records, they had also come very near seizing Nisibis, and would have succeeded had not Laetus, who was besieged there, saved the place. Measures were taken to ensure the favour of the urban populace at Rome with more lavish games and further distribution of largesse before Septimius set off for the east. Embarking at Brundisium, the imperial retinue sailed directly across to Asia Minor. On arrival in Syria, Septimius mustered his forces and headed straight towards Nisibis. The Parthians retreated before he arrived. With the Parthians driven off, he moved back to Syria to prepare for a much more ambitious campaign against the Parthian heartland itself. In the late summer of 197, Septimius invaded Parthia. He was accompanied by a brother of the Parthian king. The Parthians put up minimal resistance, and before the year was up, Septimius took the Parthian capital of Ctesiphon. He permitted his soldiers to plunder the entire city, and on the 28th of January 198, Septimius proclaimed that he had conquered all of Parthia. An auspicious date indeed, for it was exactly a century since Trajan's ascension to the imperial throne. Trajan himself, of course, had delivered a smashing victory over the Parthians. Unfortunately for Septimius, he would also fail to capture Hatra, just as Trajan himself failed to seize the city 90 years earlier. Following this campaign, Septimius's eldest son, Antoninus, was proclaimed co-Augustus with his father, and his younger son, Geta, was granted the title of Caesar. During the spring and summer of 198, Septimius devoted attention to reorganizing the eastern frontiers. He created a new province, Mesopotamia. Osrhoene was retained as a province too, with its capital now at Carrhae, given the rank of a Roman colony.
We're down near
The
the
reformed
end.
province of Mesopotamia was placed under an equestrian prefect with a legionary garrison of the newly formed Legio I and III Parthica.
We're going to cut.
With Syria strengthened behind two new provinces and the entire eastern frontier reorganized, Septimius set off for Alexandria.
We're going to. This is quite a long video and rather detailed, but you get the message that at least one African, North African, as a matter of fact, became the emperor of Rome. We're aware of Hannibal. Hannibal was also from the same region that this Roman emperor was from, and he did the same thing. He went across the Alps. He came, but Hannibal was not able to defeat Rome. It didn't work for him. But Hannibal was great in his own right. You see, the reason for all of this, dealing with African history, is because we as African people have been taught that we were inferior, that we had no history. And when we began to look at some of the history, our history, then we know that was not true. I have mentioned in my account of West Africa in particular, the man by the name of Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa has been acclaimed by current and present day historians as been of all the people in the world, all the billionaires or whatever, to be the richest man that ever lived. This man accounted for, he was rich, and he was Muslim. Okay, he just happened to be Muslim, and he reigned over the empire of Mali in West Africa. But there were other kingdoms. Ghana, for example, not so much the present day Ghana, but Ghana was an ancient empire, a great empire at one point. Songhai was another one, a great empire in West Africa. And we also hear about a school that was really a civilization that was known for its schools, known for its university, and the great University of Timbuktu. People would come from all over the world to get an education from the University of Timbuktu. Tremendous history, and it's not all in one place. We look on the east side of Africa, on the east coast, at the ancient empire of Ethiopia, an area. And one that we should learn to respect and care, because Ethiopia retained much of its history, and it also retained its freedom during the period of colonization, and that's a fact. There's a lot we learn in terms of African history, so we want to keep it up. We're going to continue to share information with you. We share poetry and prose and that kind of thing. But we want you to know that you are somebody. that you are somebody. You do have a history. You do have a not only presently, but it's rooted in the past. rooted in history, long history. It's very, very, very true. But you know that things are happening in Lebanon. Uh, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening in the Lebanon Valley Farmers Market. New vendors are coming in. Uh, we have a lot of things are happening with African paradise. We had a monumental amount of clothing that we have purchased an African paradise. So if you're looking for a buba, and if you're looking for uh, oils, if you're looking for statues, if you're looking for original paintings, we expect the next month or so to have a whole slew of new original oil paintings from Guinea-Bissau. So, hey, we come down and see us. Give us a call. Don't write us off because we're doing it. Eventually, we may have to move. I don't know. We're looking at it. We're really feeling good about the new management that is coming in, that has given us the space that we need. These are some of the clothes items that we have. Drums, we have mud cloth and African clothing that we sell and that we share. Uh, so, hey, we would like to. This is a picture at the Black History program that we put on my desk. We have masks. We have all kinds of masks. The collection from the Congo, from the Ivory Coast. Hey, we can use your support. So you come on. And again, here's the family. There's Reverend Gaskin in the background. There's my wife and myself, and we were honored at that program, and we were still overwhelmed and pleased with the kind of wonderful treatment that we have received from the Gaskin. But I was just thinking about this and appreciate them because every major turn that we've had, we opened up the museum in Middletown, 3rd Street. The Gaskin have always been supporters of our program, and we appreciate the support because no Black business, all of the lip service in the world, no Black business can survive unless someone purchases. You don't, you die, and and don't think you appreciate it. Maria Conspala has a play coming on pretty soon, so we're pretty active in this James family. She has coming on in May, the Gamut Theater. I think 4 different individuals for that play. Hair Story. They're dealing with the whole issue of hair and people being discriminated against based on that. So if we try to keep our fingers in the dike, we try to keep ourselves active and doing some positive things. Oh, here we are. Here's hair story. May 7th, May 5th, 6th, and 4th, and May 7th. Hair story, Reclaiming Our Crown, presented collection with the Harrisburg chapter of Links. I think the show starts here at 7:30, and on May 7th, the last show that's 30. So it's we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to you coming out and supporting us. But the James family is still active and doing things, and we appreciate this help and support. But let me tell you, we cannot do it without you. That is an impossible task. Without the support, we can't do it. All right, and we need your support also the continuous on 7104. and the things that is done. We're coming down near the end, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. On the issue of healthcare, we're going to continue to raise that issue. I'm hoping to get some healthcare providers in here and talk with us about the present system. I'm really concerned about the treatment of people who need elder care and the abuse of elderly people and some of these nursing homes is terrible. And then the lack of support. Have we say visiting angels that come to the house, and they need help there too, and we need it now, and we need people. We spend our lives to take care of you. By the time you took care of us, we got to give folks the respect and the dignity that they deserve. So I'm going to sign off now and say thank you so much for tuning in. We'll look to see you next week. And until that time, this is Richard James says, so long and take care. Goodbye.
Thank you again for tuning in to the Richard James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.